All right, so this next page is kind of what I was referring to about how and why I know my powers of 2, my powers of 3, 4, 5, 6, and how I have my n and my n squared and my n cubed memorized. We're looking for you to do as many of these without the calculator, but I have to tell you, and you don't like hearing this, but it's best if you memorize this entire page. So instead of plugging it into the calculator, see what you can do on your own. For example, I know that I can list each of these values from my brain. Now it absolutely helps me to have them in front of me while I'm doing these. It helps me break down the numbers. I spin the numbers around in my head all the time, and I look for patterns that I see. So 16, I'm not 100% sure of. I know 20. 25, I'm pretty sure of. And I know 30. I'll have to go back and check for 16. So have a little contest with yourself and see how many of these that you can do without. It's about the max for me. I know that 10 cubed is 1,000. And I know that 20 cubed is going to be 800, not 1,000. No, 8,000. I was right. And I know 30 cubed is 3 times 3 is 9 times 3 is 27. And then there's 3 zeros on that. All right, my powers of 2. These are the most important building blocks of what we're doing. 2, the first is 2. Keep in mind that anything to the 0 power is 1. And then I have 4. And then I have 8. Then I have 16, 32. This is the one I used on our previous page. 64. That's about all I have in my head. I'm going to need the calculator for the rest. So finish this page and then work on playing with your calculator and simplifying these values. All right, I'm moving on to the next page of solving. If you didn't pause the video and finish the previous page, pause now, go back and do that, because I want to make sure that you can have that sheet available for you to reference while you're working on these. All right, now we're talking about solving. So far, every time that we've talked about simplifying, we haven't had an equal sign. Well, now we have these equal signs, which means I'm solving for all of the values of x. When I'm looking for all of the values, that means I need to consider whether or not there's a positive and a negative value. So we have to go back to these rules where if the index is an even value, then you always need a plus minus. If the radicand, which is that inside number, so if I'm talking about a radical, this is the radicand, whatever value is inside there, is negative, you're always going to need an I. If the index is odd, that means that the answer never, and this is important, that it never needs a plus minus or an I. And the sign blank, the radicand, your sign is going to match. Ooh, my blue pen is dying on me. Your sign is always going to match the radicand. That's the inside number. All right, so let's take a look at this. Your first job is to isolate your exponent or your radical. So I have x to the 4th is equal to, if I add 5 to each side, 48. I'm going to take the 4th root of each side to give me just 1x. Because my power is even, I know that I need a plus minus, and then I have to think about 48 and simplify that. Go ahead, draw a tree and see if we match. 48, I know, is 6 times 8. That's 3 and 2. 4 and 2. So here's my 4 2's. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1, 2 comes out, and the fourth root of 3 is left inside. So my final answer is x is equal to plus or minus 2 times the fourth root of 3. All right. Again, we have to isolate our exponent. So our first thing we're going to do is divide by 5. So x cubed is equal to the opposite. And 625 divided by 5 is 125. Let's verify that on a calculator. I want to do that in my head and mess up. So 625 divided by 5, 125. Oh, oops. So now we're going to take the third root of each side. And this negative is just going to mean that my answer, I'll go back to my blue, my answer is going to be equal to the opposite. That sign is going to match the radicand. The sign matches the radicand, which is going to be negative 5, because I know that 5 cubed is 125. That's one of my friendly numbers. All right. So go ahead and pause the video before you watch me solve each of these and see if you can do it on your own. Did you get that one? Pause the video, try it on your own. Pause your video and see if you can get the next one. So this one's a little different because now I have an expression inside, and when I take the fourth root, be very careful that you remember your plus minus and what that means. X minus 4 is equal to plus or minus. Now the fourth root of 256, if I have 256 and I can break that down, I'm pretty sure it's got a 16, yep, into 16 and 16. So I've got 4 and 4 and 4 and 4, which means it's plus or minus 4. Now be very careful here because that means that x minus 4 could be equal to positive 4, and that x minus 4 could be equal to negative 4. So because of this plus minus, I have two different equations that I have to finish solving. If I add 4 to each side, x is equal to 8. If I add 4 to each side, here x is equal to 0. So make sure you get those two answers. All right, let's talk about our next one. Divide by negative 1, divide by negative 1. X plus 1 to the 7th power is equal to negative 2,187. So we're going to break that number down and see what we like. 2,187 divided by all the x's in the whole wide world. And we're going to look for anything that works out evenly. 9 and 243. So 2187, 9 and 243. So 243 is a number that I recognize. We've seen it before. But we can go ahead and repeat our y is equal to, and I can do 243 divided by all the numbers in the whole wide world and look at its factors. There's some more 9s and 27s. Now I'm back down to my friendly numbers, 9s and 3s. I'm looking for 7 of the same factor. Here's 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, and 7. So it works out evenly. When I take the 7th root of this value, I get x plus 1 is equal to, I don't need the plus or minus because this is an odd power, and I know that this is negative, so the sign comes out and matches, and it's 3, which means x is equal to negative 4, subtracting 1 from each side. Okay, here we go. Divide each side by 2, and I have x plus 3 to the 4th power is equal to 16. I know 2 to the 4th is 16, so when I take the 4th root of each side, I get x plus 3 is equal to plus or minus 2, which means x plus 3 is equal to positive 2, and x plus 3 is equal to negative 2, which means x is equal to negative 1, x is equal to negative 5. So those are my two values. All right, keep at it.